Hello all, it's me, Andy from Blitz Gaming. Hope we're having a great day. It's Friday, it's weekend time. Okay, we've got an update on the Asus Prime H610M. We've done an unboxing. I'll stick it up here somewhere so you can check it out if you want to. We paired it with the Intel Celeron G6900 budget processor and done some testing on it. We are going to test the 12100, 12400 and 12600. We'll do the 12600 next, and that'll be available about this time next week. Yeah, we tested it with Nvidia's 1030, 1650, AMD's RX 550 and 6600. We got the Corsair Vengeance, DDR4, 3200 MHz memory, and that's for all of their processors. On this board, it doesn't overclock. You can't go no higher than 3.2. We've got the Nvidia SN550 as the boot drive. Okay, let's look at the testing and we'll talk about it. Okay, we're doing testing on Windows 10, not Windows 11. You're probably saying, why? Well, there's not enough people joined the Windows 11 gang, and there's still a few bugs in there where I don't want to pick up. So I'm going to stay with Windows 10 for the time being, then we'll switch over sometime in 3 months' time. Hopefully everything will be sorted, then we go over to Windows 11. So we got the Asus Prime H610M motherboard, which we just done a review on, unboxing. Please watch it. And we got 32 MHz CL16 DDR4, which all the CPUs support. And obviously we've got the latest drivers for graphic cards, for the RGB, AMD, Nvidia, and the latest build for Windows 10 21H2. So we start off with PCmark Time Spy, and we get a score of 419. Don't forget we're on a budget CPU with 2 cores, and the RGB, what we got is nothing, no miracle worker. So that's why we've got the score of 419. I mean, it does work to a degree, but it's literally, you're talking very low frame rates. The CPU overall is only good for browsing the internet, doing your shopping, watching YouTube videos. That's about it, really. Don't forget, we're using the Fera 5 CPU cooler, so we're not getting hot at all. We're in the 30s, literally for 32C. It's nothing tops at 100% load. So yeah, it's quiet, don't make noise, no nothing with this cooler, because basically it doesn't need to spin up at all on the RGB. We switch over to PCmark CPU profile, and there's the scores. Again, don't expect anything major. It's only a 2-core CPU. Yeah, so we scroll down. Again, you can see 100% low. Got to remember, it's only a 3.4 gigahertz processor. It doesn't have no turbo, it just goes to 3.4. And we're doing basically 32C on the Fera 5 CPU cooler. Yeah, so it's nothing major. It's basically too slow in clock speed and cores to keep up with a GPU at the end of the day. So don't try and play games, and you will see, as I said earlier, you will see why in a second. We've also done PCmark 10 if you want to buy the processor for just browsing the internet, watching YouTube, doing a bit of office work. Processor is great for that. Had no problems watching videos, doing spreadsheets, anything like that. No problem, it was good enough.
So at least it's good at one thing, but as I said, don't play games with it. It just really ain't good enough for gaming at all. We will start off with CSGO. We're on the lowest preset or everything's turned off. It still has micro freezes in this game. I mean, the frame rate's not bad really. I mean, it's like the lowest of the lowest IGBs, and I know we're over the 30s, we're playable. But as a competitive game, I won't play it because it does have these micro freezes, especially when you want to shoot someone. Fortunately, the map changed. Now on high settings, still at 720p on the Intel IGP. And you get the old lot freeze, and freeze again. As I said, it's not playable. It's got too many micro freezes in the game. I've now switched over to Nvidia 1030, 1080p lowest settings. And yes, we still get the micro freezes. You can see there, we now got the frame time up. Shows you how bad it can get, because I thought, okay, what's going on here? Let's get the frame time up, and she does come a bit of a nightmare. I mean, this game actually does well. Other games, it's a complete nightmare. It's not just like micro freezes, it can be up to 5-6 seconds. Now, if you go by the frame rate, you think, well, why we get freezing? We're doing 80-90 frames a second. Yeah, but you see it when it, I said when it freezes, it's a pain, and it does it at the worst possible time. As again, if you're playing competitive gaming, it's a bad CPU to have. We now switch over to AMD's RX 550, and you see what the frame rate is in the 90s. And as you all spread out, all the frame rate starts to go up. But again, you get those micro freezes when you don't want them, and it's just, as I said, it's not a very good processor for gaming at all. And not being able, I don't think Intel actually ever made it for any type of gaming at all. We now switch over to Nvidia 1650 at 1080p. Lowest settings are all off. Game, we got a good frame rate, but the micro freezes just don't disappear. So if you look at the Celeron percentage usage, I mean, it's right up the top, and that's one of the reasons why. Basically, it's not got enough drawing power. The faster the GPU you put with it, the worse it got. But I have to say, this game was running better on AMD's hardware, or with AMD graphic cards, than Nvidia. Now on AMD's RX 6600, even though we've got a lot faster processor, it's not going much quicker than the 1650 because the GPU is too slow. The bandwidth on the CPU basically is just too small, and it can't render the frames fast enough for the GPU. We now switch back to Nvidia's 1030, 1080p on highest preset, or everything's turned on. You see there a second ago, micro freeze. Like I said, you just, that's too many. Just don't matter what card you got, it's just a pain really. That's all I can say. It just ain't playable. Different map, this time with AMD's RX 550, still at 1080p, high settings all on. I mean, like I said, they got the frame rate. It's in normal standards it'd run fine, but as I said, you get the freezes and it's just a pain. Switch over to the Nvidia 1650, another map again. As I showed before, obviously when you start, when you're all grouped together, you get a lousy frame rate, like it was in the 50s then, and then we slowly spread out, we get up to like 150, 200. It's just the nature of the game. It's the reason why I don't do charts for this game, because the frame rate is just too wide to put on the chart. And now we quickly finish off with AMD's RX 6600 on another map. Again, you see we start off with around 60 frames and we open up as soon as we all spread out. It played better, I have to say, on AMD hardware. I thought the micro freezes was a lot less than what it was on Nvidia. I'm not an AMD fan or an Nvidia fan, I'm just telling you that's how it played, in my opinion. Okay, that's CSGO out of the way. Let's move on to the next game. Battlefield 1. This is one of the games where I don't notice is as much micro freezing. There was a bit here and there, but okay, we're not on the PvP map. This is a campaign map with the tank, so I don't really notice it a lot. But I mean, it may be a bit different when you're playing on the campaign map because they're very big. But yeah, seems to play alright. Get a good frame rate with Nvidia 1030. We're at 1080p on lowest preset. We quickly switch over to AMD's RX 550 and we upgained 1080p to our highest preset. So yeah, we're doing okay. We're just in the 30s, a few drops down into the 1% low in the 20s. There is a few micro freezes. But I mean, okay, campaign, I think you'll be okay. You're not playing on, if you play on the competitive PvP, you may notice it. Switch over to Nvidia 1650. 1080p, now ultra preset. So I've got everything turned on, ultra preset. The only thing what is turned off is HDR. We don't run with HDR. So yeah, we get a good, we're in the 50s, still dropping in the low 30s. Again, the CPU is too slow. You can see the CPU is banging out 100%. It is out doing everything it can to stay up with the GPU. We switch over to AMD's RX 6600. And 1080p Ultra presets. So yeah, we're still only doing around 60 frames and still we're dropping into the 1% low. We've still got 100% CPU utilization. Even if you look at the graphic card, it's going up and down from the 30s to 70s utilization. And you can see some spikes on the frame time. It just, well, as I said, the CPU can't go any quicker. It is at maximum speed to stay with the game. Yeah, again, if you want to go on a competitive map, you'll probably find the same thing where CSGO, it was too freezing. Now, I'll let you know, I did try playing Division 2, and it was basically impossible to play. When it froze on Division, it froze between 5 to 10 seconds. It was just a nightmare. So I will show you the map when it plays in a second where it freezes. It's a nightmare. Okay, we'll move over to the chart because we've got charts on this one. I don't have to show you a dozen video shots. Okay, we look at the chart. As I said earlier, the built-in IGP 710 didn't work at all. It just basically does not load at all the game. So look at the 1030, 550. They trade blows as always, because they're close to each other. Unless one requires more memory, then literally AMD starts walking away because it's got 2 gig more of memory and it's got a higher clock speed. Look at the 1650 versus 1080. Again, here trading blows on low presets. The CPU's too slow, so they're not going there. They should be well into the 100. Both of those. Game, look at high settings on the 1030 and 550. They are dropping in below the 30 mark. So yeah, you probably want to stay in the low settings. And you go to 1650, 6600 on Ultra. Again, they're dropping slightly, but obviously they're getting into the 40s. Again, that's all down to the CPU not being fast enough. It was 100% utilisation. It just ain't going quick enough to run the game properly. Rocket League. We're on the Intel's IGP 710 at 720p. We've got everything on high quality settings. Everything turned on except anti-aliasing. So anti-aliasing is the only thing turned off. So yeah, well, we're in the 20s, so really we're on the low side. But it's one of those games which didn't have no freezing, believe it or not. It played fine, except obviously it's not fast enough. I mean, you can undo the check boxes and play around with the quality settings and get it running. We switch over to Nvidia 1030. Again, same settings, 720p. High quality settings, except anti-aliasing. I mean, it looks great, plays great. We're well into the hundreds. We do have a bit of a drop on the 1% low every now and then. But otherwise, it played fine. I mean, you're talking about what, £90 GPU with a similar priced CPU. I mean, in some sense, I mean, if this is the only game you're going to play, you'll be fine. We now switch over to the RX 550 from AMD. We are now on 1080p. High quality settings. Again, no anti-aliasing. She plays fine, no problem. Very similar to the Nvidia's 1030. We'll switch over to Nvidia 1650 on 1080p. High settings. Again, everything's on. Well, high quality settings. Everything's turned on except anti-aliasing. So yeah, we're getting good. Certainly get good performance. 150 odd frames, no problem. It plays fine. It never had any lag at all. Not that I remember. Never noticed any spikes at all while playing. Switch over to the RX 6600, and now we're going to turn anti-aliasing on at SMAA setting. And yeah, she looks great, no problem, nice clear. I mean, to be honest, I don't think I can see much difference with SMAA on or off. But it's on. It does about, I think when I did it on the 1650, it had about a 70 frame hit. So it probably does the same thing on the RX 6600. But yeah, otherwise it's playing fine, not a problem. We're well into the hundreds, 150, 200 max. So we're doing fine with the RX 6600. Okay, we look at Intel's IGP. Okay, well, yeah, we were 720p high quality, and we're just under the 30. Now, you can change the settings, the quality settings, and you get well into the 40. So it can be played on the IGP at 720p at playable settings. Okay, we go to Nvidia's 1030 and AMD's RX 550. Similar results on both of those at 720p. We got a 1080p. The IGP, yeah, okay, it's now dropped too much, it ain't worth playing. The RX 550 and Nvidia's 1030, yeah, they're still playable. We're still in 70s, over the 60 bar, so we're okay, even though we are getting a 1% low below the 30s. Nvidia 1650 and the RX 6600 have no problem playing at 1080p high quality. And we go up to SMAA. Okay, 1650 does have a big drop, but it doesn't really affect AMD's RX 6600. It's got enough memory bandwidth and speed to run with SMAA on. So that's all settings turned on at 1080p. Don't forget, this being an online game, the frame rate, I did notice if I was on one side of the pitch on my own, I could easily get another 25 frames a second on the 1030 or the RX 550. So yeah, again, it's like CSGO. If you're all bunched up, frame rate's low. If you spread out, it goes high. Obviously, we have no control over that. So, but yeah, just take this as like an average gaming run, really. Okay, Red Dead. Quickly go through the settings. We're on 720p. We've got most things turned off. For some odd reason, TAA keeps turning back on. Don't know why. Just seems to keep switching back on. I'll turn it off, reboot it after when it says reboot, and it's on again. So I'm not quite sure if it's on or off. Otherwise, everything's low setting or off. Okay, there was a miracle happened. It does play. If you want to play like 10 frames a second. So, but I mean, otherwise, yeah. You can't. I mean, you're right. You can lower the resolution even more if you wanted to, but I'm not going to. Who plays lower than 720p? Does anybody? That's my attitude. So yeah, it's there. It looks like it's in slow motion, but that's the frame rate count. I can't go no quicker. We switch over to Nvidia's 1030, still at 720p. Same settings before. And you can see, well, we're in the 20s. Again, you just don't want to go really. The Celeron's what is in this 90%, basically going up to 100%. Again, you just can't get no bandwidth out of it. Mind you, the 1030 and the 550 was not very good. Anyway, playing this game, if I remember rightly, I don't think you ever really got into a decent frame rate at all. Okay, now I'll switch over to AMD's RX 550. Same settings, still 720p. At least we're getting into the 30s now. Just. And yes, it may be because it's got darker. Now, problem is, problem with Red Dead, it doesn't, it never carries on from where you left off. The daytime changes. You're in a different position from where you left off. I don't know why Rockstar Games, I need to change it where, look, I need to do a save so I can constantly carry on from where I left off, so I can get an equal test done. So that frame rate may change slightly if the sun was out more. We switch over to Nvidia 1650, and it ain't much better than the RX 550. Basically, the CPU is basically this big, massive bottleneck. It just can't break away. Considering we're in exactly the same settings as before, except now the sun's out, because I made sure it was the sun was out. I'm now going to the RX6600, so I'm going to max everything out at 1080p. If you look at the memory required, we're on 5.7 gig of video RAM. So yeah, give you a hint. Yeah, you want to buy a graphic card. I did. If you want to be in the gaming these days, at least 8 gig of memory. So yeah, we're still only in the 30s. The CPU is doing between 90 and 100%. So doesn't matter how hard we try, the CPU, just like the other games, is capping the GPU. We cannot get away. We can't get a high frame rate. Well, a frame rate what we're like anyway. Okay, let's look at a chart. I've added a few older charts to this one. So if you look at Intel's RGB, it's the worst thing, struggling to get 12 frames. If you look at AMD's 3000G, which is quite old, several years old now, we're in the 16s, minimum 50. Now, I didn't think that would ever be beaten, the AMD Vega on the 3000G, but Intel's made a new chip which is even slower. So if we then compare it to the 5600G, which is the latest stuff, Vega 7, it just annihilates it. I mean, we're in playable frame rates in the 30s on 720p. It even beats it with a graphic card. It just shows you how badly the bottleneck is on the Celeron. Yeah, so both the AMD 550 and Nvidia 1030 have been beaten by AMD's built-in IGP Vega 7 at 720p. If you look at 11400F, the RX 550 and the 1030, it should be in the 40s. So just shows you how much the bottleneck is in total for those two cards. And when you look at the 1650 and the RX 6600 and they're being beaten, something's definitely not right. So yeah, again, don't buy the Celeron G6900 for gaming. It's just a bad omen. As a note, the old processors we've tested are on an older graphic card drive as well. They're on 28.2 instead of 2010.2, so it's only 2 months out. Okay, Shadow of War. This is the second chapter. If you're not familiar with the game, we're at 720p on the IGP, 710. So yeah, okay, we're below the 30 barrier as always. So yeah, it's well, it plays okay. It's not really freezing, but we are below that 30 barrier mark, which we don't really want to be at. And as I've said before, the game looks great at any setting really. We do a quick change to Nvidia's 1030, but this time at 1080p, low settings again. So yeah, we still got better frame rate. We're now up to the high 30s, maxing out in the 40s. So yeah, can't complain at all. Switch over to AMD's RX 550. Again, 1080p, low presets. So yeah, it works. I don't really notice any major freezing like in the other games we've tested. I won't say there's not any, but I've never come across any real major at all. When I was fighting, it seemed to be okay. We go back to Nvidia's 1030, this time on medium preset. So we're still in the 30s. Okay, we are dipping into the high 20s. Yeah, you'd probably be better off probably staying at low. But no, I mean, like I said, I've never really had any major hiccups playing the game. It's extremely quick. Switch over to the AMD RX 550, 1080p medium settings. So just the same as we had, just different graphic card. I don't know if you noticed that the UI, regardless if I'm in 720p or 1080p, it's the same size. The Afterburner one. This is the only game I've got what does that. Somehow the game seems to affect the Afterburner. I mean, again, I'm not worried. It just comes out one size regardless. There's sometimes comes handy knowing when if it's come out. If you recorded it in the wrong size, you know by the Afterburner's got bigger numbers. But on this one, I have to make sure because the numbers come out the same size regardless. We now switch over to the 1650. Staying on medium preset at 1080p, and we're now in the hundreds frames. So we're getting a good thing. Again, we're not really getting the freezing like we did on the other games, so it's a bonus. It's a bit like Rocket League. Well, Rocket League played fine. That dragon keeps exploding me, does my head in. I will get my own back on it soon. Switch over to AMD's RX 6600, and you can see we're still in the hundreds again. It's not louder. It's basically hit the bandwidth for the CPU. I mean, it should be well over. Well, certainly should be at least 150 upwards. You would have thought, because it's actually twice as fast as the 1650, so it should really be walking it. It's coming out at the same sort of frame rate as the 1650. We go back to Nvidia 1650. Select 1080p, but this time we are on ultra settings, or ultra preset. So yeah, we've lost what, I don't know, nearly 50 frames in some cases. But I mean, she's playing, like I said, it's all down to the CPU. The CPU's causing all sorts of trouble. It's going up and down at the moment. We're at 60, 80, 90%. And the graphic card, if you look at it, it's bashed out at 100% because it's just waiting on the CPU to do all the drawing. We switch over to AMD's RX 6600. Okay, it's come out better. We're talking about 25, 30 frames higher than the 1650. But then again, so it should do as well. It's a way faster card. It's actually about twice as fast. But the CPU is causing all sorts of trouble. And you can see there we're on 100% now. Literally CPU utilization. We're a lot higher, about 15% higher, more now than what was on the Nvidia 1650. The game don't use that much memory. Well, on this, it seems to vary from card to card. We've got there, look, just under 8 gig of memory being used. Again, if you look at the memory, the video memory, we're basically just under 8 gig of memory. So as I said before, if you can get a graphic card, make sure you've got 8 gig of memory. If you go back and look at the Nvidia 1650, it was literally smashing 4 gig barrier all the way through. Okay, let's have a look at the chart. As before, I stuck a few other processors in there from the other charts. They're not that old. As I said, the driver is 2182 instead of 2110.2. So 2 months out. You can see again the CPU Intel G6900 is too slow. 2 cores and 3.5 clock. It's just not powerful enough for the graphic cards at all. You can see again AMD's 3000G and 5600G built-in graphics are way faster, especially the 5600G. And if you put a graphic card in, you can see the difference. Don't forget the 5600G has 6 cores, and the the Celeron only has 2 cores. But obviously, if you go by the 3000G, also only got 2 cores, it still makes the Celeron too slow to play games. At medium settings, the RX 550 and Nvidia's 1030 are probably too slow. We're not making a 30 barrier. We're in the 20s, high-end 20s. So yeah, I'll probably try and steer away from the medium setting. I mean, 1650 RX 6600 have no problem, unless I gain all the way up to Ultra. Those 2 cards have no problem playing the game. Especially the RX 6600, it pulls away quite a lot. Okay, let's move on to the next game. Warhammer 2. We'll be switching over to Warhammer 3 very soon, when it's released in next week. And we're on the Intel's IGP 710 at 720p, lowest preset. And on those settings, you can see we are struggling to get over to 30. But we're in the low 20s, and it's basically a game you want to probably keep away from. At the end of the day, you can load the settings even more. There's obviously a few more settings on the setup, and I think you can lower the resolution slightly more as well, if you wanted to. Okay, now we switch over to Nvidia's 1030, still at 720p, but this time on the high preset settings. You can see the frame time I got on there. It's a bit all over the place. And the CPU utilization, well, we're up near 100% again, and so is the GPU. We switch over to AMD's RX 550. CPU utilization is still quite high, 85s, 90s. Graphic cards at 100%, up and down. Frame time's a lot better. Again, it definitely runs better on AMD hardware. We're over 2.7 gig. So again, you're definitely gonna want a graphic card with more. Well, ideally, you want to really go 8 gig minimum these days. Now I go over to 1080p on the Nvidia 1030 at low presets. We're still in the 30s, so still playable. It's going to be one of those games you want to be 720p, high presets. Depends how big your army you want your army to be, and the clarity of the picture quality. So yeah, we're still banging out. The graphic card's doing 100%. We switch back over to AMD's RX 550. 1080p, low presets. So now we've gone down to 2 gig of memory. If you look at the memory for the video RAM, it really depends how much you want, really. It plays fine. You can see the frame time's great. Now we shoot over to Nvidia 1650. 1080p still on low settings. And now you can see we're now going over the 100 frame rate, and we're back up to 2.5 gig of video memory being used. CPU still at 100%, so is the graphic card nearly. So I'm not solving anything there. We switch over to AMD's RX 6600. Now we're up to the 140 barrier, nearly 170 on max. 1% low, we still big drop in, and we're still around the 2.5 gig of video memory being used. Okay, now on Nvidia 1650, 1080p, high preset settings. Yeah, so looking alright. Again, unfortunately, I ain't got the frame time up on this one. CPU is still doing close to 100%. We're on 2.8 gig of video RAM being used. The graphic card is doing at 80% itself. I mean, literally, it's starved of everything. I mean, 2 cores, 2 threads is just not powerful enough for this type of work. Switch over to AMD's RX 6600. 1080p now on Ultra preset. And we finish it off on Ultra settings, large armies, large textures, large everything. See how it runs. Again, on the chart, we see Intel's IGP at the lowest, just into the 20s. It's not really playable, really, even on this game. And we go over to the Nvidia's 1030 and AMD's RX 550 in the 30s. We're at a playable state on those 2 graphic cards. I've got 1080p, considering this game's a AMD sponsor. Nvidia's 1030 beats the RX 550 by about 8 frames, but well, that's just life. The Nvidia 1650 and AMD's RX 6600, well, walk it really over the hundreds, even on this CPU. But don't forget, the frame time was way better on AMD hardware. It was quite spiky on Nvidia stuff. Ultra and high settings, not much difference, except for the 1650. It does drop to the 40s, and the 1% lows below the 20s. So yeah, it gets a bit spiky for that, and game probably wouldn't recommend it. I'd say stay on the high settings if you want to play with this setup. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. Okay, we're on the Intel IGP 710. We're at 720p lowest preset settings. It's too low to play. We're in the 20s. It's got plenty of micro freezing. It's this game you don't want to play at all on this CPU. We'll switch over to Nvidia's 1030, but this time 1080p low preset. See there, big freeze. Look at the frame time. It's a nightmare. It's awful. Basically, this game is not playable at all. We switch over to AMD's RX 550. Again, it's better on the frame time, but it still freezes. Go by the frame rate. See there, well, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 second freeze. If you look at the frame rate, we've got zeros. It shows you how much it's freezing. It's awful. We go over to Nvidia 1650, and we've already got zeros. It just don't want to run. The Celeron's at 100%. We even have we're frozen there. Now going again. Yeah, 100% Celeron. 60-70% GPU. Memory's low, 1 gig of memory, but it just runs. The frame rate is just poor. Switch over to AMD's RX 6600, 1080p low preset. So yeah, we got, well, it says 100 frames, but you see there, big freeze. the bigger the GPU you put with it, the worse it gets. And you can look at the frame time, where you got nasty spikes everywhere. It just can't render. The CPU just can't keep up with a GPU. We now switch back to the 1650. We go up to Ultra. That fuzziness, by the way, on the screen is not to do with the game. It's to do with the recording. For some bizarre reason, when I put it on a certain setting, the recording always records funny. It's not just this game, it does it in others as well. I can't work out why. But regardless, the game has still got zeros. We've got plenty of frames freezing. Graphic cards at 100% utilisation now, as well as the CPU. It's awful. Switch over to AMD's RX 6600 again, Ultra preset. It's still like zeros, and the frame time is awful. We just can't get a nice setup at all. I just basically keep steer of this game if you're going to get this GPU. Sorry, not the GPU, get this CPU. It's just not good enough. Okay, let's look at a chart. You see, it looks like something's missing. Yeah, basically the 1% low. We keep going down to zero for too long. So it's basically just shows you it froze plenty of times. So yes, we won't talk much about the game, except I suggest you don't play it. Well, basically you don't buy the Celeron. It's just not good enough. 2 cores, 2 threads. It's not good enough for today's gaming. Okay, let's move on. Grand Theft Auto 5. I don't know if you know, they have just announced GTA 6. So yeah, game, I was going to test, well I tested it, but I haven't put it on the charts. This is just a quick clip, and I'll show you why. If you notice there, the picture does not render. It's very freezy. You can see it on the frame time. It's just awful. It doesn't just do it on the RX 6600, did it on a 1650 and a 1030. It was just awful. It's basically just terrible. It says your CPU cannot stay up with the GPU, cannot render fast enough. Okay, I'll show you now Division 2. Okay, we're on Division 2 on the 1650. I thought, okay, we'll give this a run. But it just, freezing wise, is awful. I mean, when it froze, this made The Witcher look good. When it froze, this froze every time for at least 5 seconds when it freezes. It's awful.
Vital signs critical.
Yeah, so it just freezes. It's a bleeding nightmare. You just, if you got more than 2 characters on the screen, you just don't want to do anything. It's evil.
Okay, you've seen the testing, and basically it's not worth the effort, really. It was okay for browsing the internet, online shopping, watching YouTube, that sort of stuff. It was fine, no problem. At the end of the day, Intel probably never made it for gaming. It's just a budget processor to do, as I said, online shopping stuff. Gaming wise, as you saw, it froze. Yeah, loads of micro freezes. The Witcher, Division 2, basically, well, Division 2 was just a nightmare. I mean, when that froze, it was like 5 seconds. It was just not playable at all. It was just evil, horrid. And The Witcher again, that was freezing. Again, you trying to play on there, not happy. Battlefield, okay, it worked in a campaign mode, and we were doing what, 35, 40 frames. I wouldn't suggest playing it at all on PvP. because I think you get the same thing. It'll be horrid to play. Okay, if you want to play Rocket League, Shadow of War, they seem to work fine. I have no problem. Even on when we've done Warhammer, Warhammer seemed to put fine, okay, fine as well. Frame rate's a bit low, but it seemed to be okay. So there is some exceptions, but majority, when it went wrong, it was terrible. I mean, GTA, how old is GTA? 8 years old, 10 years old, I don't know. And when we put it with an RX 6600, 1650, the 1030 on the high settings, we had that problem where it wasn't rendering screen. It was just, the quality was terrible. It's like, okay, I won't benchmark this. And that's an old game. I mean, you would have thought that would work fine. But no, it didn't want to know. So, again, yeah, you may be, if you're on a budget, you think, oh well, I'm going to buy a budget processor, don't buy the Celeron. It is no good for gaming. Just keep away from it. And if you can wait for our benchmark when we do the 12100, I'll try to have them all done by the end of the month. It just takes time, the amount of games we test. Yeah, I could just do 1 or 2 and it'll be fine. I'll be able to do them in a couple of days. Well, in a day, really, but we do about 10. And it's a bit awkward. So yeah, as I said, it's a great processor for online shopping. No problem with that. Budget build, if that's all you want to do, fine. Anything you do if you want to use Microsoft Office or any Office suite, really, do a bit of word processing, that sort of stuff, fine. Motherboard, had no problem with the motherboard running. Okay, we are running on the Celeron, and we were running with a Fera 5. The temperature only got up to about, what, 35 C maximum ever. I don't think it went ever over that. It never locked up or crashed at all doing any normal stuff. Except we obviously had the render problems with the gaming, but that was really a gaming bug. Otherwise it worked fine. I had no problem with sound on the board, no nothing. At the end of the day, I mean, I won't know how stable it is until I put the 12600 in there. Ideally, I wouldn't want a 129, but I have no plans to buy a 12900 processor. So if you expect me to buy one, it's not going to happen. So yeah. So I hope you like the review, and I will see you in the next one with the 12600 CPU on this board. Okay, that's me done. That is all. Have fun. And don't forget to subscribe.